The first thing I remember clearly is the smell of disinfectant and warmed plastic, the particular hospital smell that never quite leaves your clothes. It clings to your hair, your skin. You can wash and still catch it later, standing at your own kitchen sink, as if the place followed you home. I was propped up in a bed that wasn't mine, wearing a thin gown that did not close properly at the back. My left side felt like it belonged to someone else. My mouth was dry. When I tried to swallow, it felt as if I'd forgotten the motion. A nurse came in with a clipboard and spoke to me in a voice that was practiced and kind. She asked my name and the date. I gave the answers slowly, careful not to make a mistake. I've always disliked looking confused in front of strangers. It's a small pride, but at my age, you collect small prides the way you collect small losses. When she left, I stared at the ceiling tiles. They were speckled, like someone had flicked paint up there decades ago and no one had bothered to repaint since. I counted the tiles, then the little holes in each one, then the fluorescent panels, because there wasn't much else to do. I could hear my heart monitor now and then, a steady rhythm that seemed too loud for such a quiet room. Each beep felt like an announcement. Still here. Still here. Still here. My daughter arrived later that morning. I knew she had been there the night before. They told me she had. I had a vague memory of her face close to mine, of her hand on my forearm. But memory after anesthetic is not a reliable thing. It comes in fragments, like a radio station cutting in and out. When she walked in properly, daylight behind her, she looked put together in a way I hadn't managed in months. Hair brushed, clothes clean and fitted, a small necklace resting where her collarbones met. She leaned down and kissed my cheek as if we were on good terms and always had been. "Dad?" she said softly, as if loudness might crack me. "You gave us a scare." Her eyes were red-rimmed, but I couldn't tell whether it was lack of sleep or careful practice. She had always been good at appearing appropriate in any situation. Even when she was a teenager, she had an instinct for what expression to wear. "Where am I?" I asked, though I knew. "In recovery," she said, and then more practical. "You're in the surgical ward now. The operation went well. They said you did really well." I nodded. My throat burned again. She poured water from a little plastic jug into a cup and helped me drink through a straw. "Slowly," she warned. "Just small sips." I did as I was told. It would become a pattern. Over the next day, I learned the basic facts the way you learn a new address. Repetition, confirmation, acceptance. I had fallen. That was what everyone said. A fall at my age is never just a fall. It is a hinge. It turns your life onto another line. They told me it happened outside my house. I had been carrying something, most likely. A small bag of groceries, perhaps. I could not remember the moment itself. The last clean memory was of stepping out of my front door and feeling the air. After that, it was blur and sound and bright light. The injury was serious. A broken hip, complications, bruising that had spread into areas it had no business reaching. I needed major surgery. They used careful phrases, all of them designed to avoid frightening me. But I heard the truth beneath them. "At your age, given your fragility, we'll monitor you closely. There's a risk. When a person is old enough, risk becomes a constant companion. You stop thinking in terms of certainty. Even the morning feels like a gift you don't want to acknowledge in case it is taken away." My daughter sat by the bed with her phone in hand, answering messages, making calls, organizing things I hadn't asked her to organize. She spoke to doctors as if she had always belonged in that world. She asked about medication schedules. She asked about discharge plans. She asked about physiotherapy and follow-up appointments. I should have been grateful. A man in my position does not have the luxury of rejecting help. But something in me tightened each time she spoke for me, as if my voice had become optional. She brought me small comforts, a pair of slippers, a clean set of pajamas, my reading glasses. She had even remembered my toothbrush, the one with the thicker handle that doesn't slip in my fingers. I went to your place, she said casually. I hope you don't mind. I used your spare key. I didn't mind, exactly. The spare key was there to be used in emergencies. But I noticed she didn't say where she had found it. I lay in that bed for days. Time is strange in hospital. It stretches and collapses. A short walk to the bathroom can feel like an expedition. A day can pass in a series of checkups and meals you barely taste. The pain came in waves. It was not a dramatic pain, not the kind you shout about. It was a steady, grinding ache that made you focus your mind on a single point. A pain that made you understand why some people stop fighting. When the physiotherapist arrived, a young man with strong hands and calm eyes, he helped me swing my legs over the side of the bed. The movement made my body revolt. I grit my teeth. I refused to make noise. My daughter watched closely. "You don't have to be brave," she said. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to explain that bravery wasn't the point. It was simply habit. I had been quiet about pain my entire life. It was how I was raised. If something hurt, you got on with it. The first time I stood, my vision narrowed and the room swayed. I clung to the frame of the walker. The physiotherapist held my elbow, his grip firm without being patronizing. "That's it," he said. "Just breathe. One step. One." I managed 2 steps before I had to sit. My daughter exhaled as if she had been holding her breath. "You see?" she said quickly. "You're doing it." It was meant as encouragement, but it landed like an instruction. Do it. Keep doing it. Make progress. Recover. Be sensible. In the evenings, when the ward quieted and the lights dimmed, she would sit and talk. Not about feelings, not about fear. Practical things. Bills, mail, the garden, the cat next door that kept getting into my yard, the fridge that was making a noise, the way my front steps might need a handrail now. I listened and nodded. I tried to focus. The medication dulled my mind. It was like trying to hold onto a slippery bar of soap. One evening, she brought in a folder. "I've been doing some sorting," she said. The folder was thick, stuffed with papers. I could see the corner of a bank statement, the edge of a letter from my insurance company, a hospital discharge form. She opened it as if it were a normal thing to bring to a man in recovery. "I just want to make sure everything is covered," she said. "You don't need to think about these things right now. That's my job." I looked at her. She was smiling, but it was the smile she used at customer service counters. Polite, efficient, a smile that did not invite argument. "I didn't ask you to do that," I said carefully. She nodded, still smiling. "I know. I'm doing it because I love you, because you're not in a position to do it." There was a pause while she let that settle, as if it were a perfectly reasonable conclusion. "You could have called," I said. "I did call," she replied. "You were in surgery, and then you were out of it. Someone had to step in." She said it gently, but the meaning was clear. You were unavailable, so I took over. It was not untrue. After that, she began to mention my finances more often, as if it were a natural extension of my recovery. "The bank account is fine," she told me. "But you've got some direct debits set up that don't make sense. There are subscriptions here. Some of them look old. We should clean that up." I didn't remember any subscriptions. I might have had one, perhaps for a newspaper or a service I'd forgotten. I couldn't be sure. "Okay," I said. She made a note in her phone. "And your credit card," she continued. "You have a limit that's probably too high for you now. We should reduce it. There's no need for it. For you now." She had slipped the phrase in as if it were obvious that my now was different from my before. As if I had crossed a line where my preferences mattered less. "We'll see," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "Dad, I'm not trying to take anything from you. I'm trying to keep you safe." The word safe was becoming a key she could use to unlock any door. A doctor came in the next morning to speak about discharge. He was a pleasant man, brisk and competent. He talked about rehabilitation, about the likelihood of falls, about the need for support. "You'll need someone with you," he said. "At least initially." My daughter nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, I'm arranging it." The doctor turned to me. "Do you have family nearby?" "Yes," I said. "My daughter." "And any other children?" "Just her." My daughter's hand landed on my blanket, light and possessive. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll manage." It was meant to comfort, but it had the feeling of a decision being made. When I got home, the house smelled wrong. Not dirty, exactly. Just different. Like someone else's air had mixed with mine. My daughter had been there. She had cleaned. She had opened windows. She had rearranged things. The chairs in the living room were shifted, angled toward each other as if for conversation. I preferred them facing the television. The small table by the sofa was moved. The pile of mail I kept on the corner of the kitchen bench was gone. The familiar clutter that made the house feel like mine had been thinned. "It's better like this," she said, noticing my gaze. Less tripping hazards. There it was again. Safe. She had installed a handrail on the front steps. She had put a non-slip mat in the shower. She had placed a pill organizer on my kitchen counter, bright plastic compartments labeled by day. "You'll forget otherwise," she said, as if this were already proven. I wanted to protest. I wanted to tell her I had managed my own life for decades. But I also knew the truth. I had fallen. I had broken. I had been helpless on the ground until someone found me. My independence had a crack in it now, and everyone could see it. So I said nothing. She stayed the first night on the couch. She insisted. "I'm not leaving you alone," she said. "Not yet." I lay in my bed and listened to the quiet sounds of my own house. The refrigerator hum. A distant car. The occasional creak of timber cooling in the night. Familiar sounds that should have soothed me. Instead, I felt watched. Not in a sinister way. In a practical way. Like a man under supervision. The next morning she made breakfast, porridge, soft food. She watched me eat. "You need protein too," she said, and added a boiled egg to my plate. I ate because I was hungry, and because refusing felt childish. After breakfast, she sat at the kitchen table and opened her laptop. "I've taken a few days off work," she said. "I'm going to sort things out while I'm here. Make calls, organize care, and get your paperwork in order." I lowered myself into the chair opposite her, careful with my hip. The movement was slow and humiliating. I had always been strong. Even into my 70s, I could lift things most men my age wouldn't attempt. Now I had to think about sitting down like it was a complicated maneuver. She began with my bills. She had them arranged in neat piles. "You've got late notices," she said. "I don't," I replied automatically. She slid a letter across the table. I recognized my electricity company's logo. The letter's tone was polite but firm. Overdue. Action required. "I must have missed it," I said. She didn't gloat. She didn't scold. She simply nodded, as if the evidence had spoken. "That's what I mean," she said gently. "This is how things slip when you're on your own, especially now." Now again. She asked for my bank login. I hesitated. "Dad," she said, her voice softening the way you soften a hand before you take hold of something. "I'm not going to take your money. I'm trying to help you." "I can do it," I said. She watched me for a moment, then glanced at the walker by the wall, at the pill organizer, at the stack of discharge notes. She did not point at them. She didn't need to. The room was full of proof that I could not do everything I once did. "You can't even stand up without wincing," she said quietly. "Let me do this. Just for now." Just for now is another key. It opens doors you can't close again. I gave her the login. She typed quickly, competent and focused. She paid bills, canceled things, moved money between accounts with the ease of someone rearranging furniture. She talked as she worked, narrating her actions as if that made them more acceptable. I'm just transferring this so the bills don't bounce. I'm setting up alerts so we know what's coming out. I'm making sure your account isn't vulnerable. Vulnerable. Another word that makes decisions feel inevitable. When she finished, she looked up and smiled. See, she said. All sorted. I nodded, but I didn't feel sorted. I felt slightly erased. Over the next week, she came every day. Sometimes she stayed the night, sometimes she didn't. She organized a visiting nurse for wound checks. She arranged physiotherapy at home. She spoke to my GP, then told me what the GP had said as if translating my own life into instructions. Your blood pressure needs monitoring, she said. You need to reduce salt. You need to drink more water. She made lists. She stuck them on my fridge. The kitchen began to look like a workplace. One afternoon, when I was feeling a little stronger, I made myself a cup of tea without asking. I moved slowly, leaning on the counter for balance, but I did it. It felt good to do something ordinary. My daughter walked in and saw the kettle steaming. "What are you doing?" she asked, alarmed. "Making tea," I said. "You should have called me," she replied immediately, as if a cup of tea were a medical procedure. "I can make tea," I said. She came closer, scanning me. "Are you dizzy? Did you take your medication?" "Yes," I said. She relaxed a fraction. "Okay, I worry." Worry was the wrapping paper around everything. I drank my tea and pretended it tasted normal. It was around that time she began to mention my will. Not directly at first. She was too clever for that. She approached it the way a person approaches a difficult topic with someone they think might resist. Sideways. "I had to find your insurance documents," she said one evening, sitting at my table with another folder. "They were in the bottom drawer with a bunch of old papers. There's a lot of important stuff in there." I nodded. "And I found your will," she added, as if it were incidental. My stomach tightened, a small, involuntary reaction. The will was not a secret. It was in my filing cabinet for a reason. But it had always felt private, even though I had no one else to leave things to except her. "It's old," she said, flipping a page. "It doesn't reflect, well, anything that's happened in the last few years." "It's fine," I said. She looked at me with patient concern. "Dad, you nearly died." I didn't answer. I didn't want to agree with her phrasing. Nearly died is a phrase that makes you a different kind of person. It changes what people feel entitled to say. "You need to make sure things are clear," she continued. "Not just for me, for you, for your wishes. So no one can challenge anything if something happens." "No one will challenge anything," I said. She gave a small, sympathetic smile. "You think that. But people do strange things when there's money involved." There were no people. There was just her. "You're my daughter," I said. "You know what I want." She nodded quickly. "I do. That's why I want it properly documented. Because if you're not here to explain it, then you can't." The logic was airtight. It had the cold efficiency of a well-built argument. "I'm not changing my will because I fell over," I said. Her expression remained calm. "It wasn't just a fall. It was major surgery. You're still in a fragile period. The doctor said the next few months are critical. Complications happen, infections happen, blood clots happen." She spoke as if reading from a brochure. She had done her research. "I don't want to talk about this," I said. She paused, then softened her voice. "Okay, not now. I'm just saying we should plan." Plan. Another word that sounds harmless until you realize what it covers. That night, when she left, I sat alone in the living room with my leg elevated and the television on low. I didn't watch anything in particular. The flicker was company. I thought about my will. It had been written after my wife died. A simple thing. My house, my savings, my possessions, all to my daughter. There were a few small gifts to charities and old friends. Nothing complicated, no trusts, no conditions. I had never believed in controlling people from the grave. It was already, in a practical sense, hers. So why did her mention of it feel like pressure? Because it wasn't about what she would receive. It was about when she would receive it and how much control she could hold over the process before then. I did not say that out loud. I simply sat, listening to the refrigerator hum, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not even fear, a kind of quiet caution. The following week, she returned with a different approach. She brought lunch, placed it on the table, and talked about her own life. Her work, her plans, her wedding. She had been engaged for some time. I had met her fiancé only a handful of times. He was polite, distant, the kind of man who let her lead conversations. When she spoke about him now, she spoke in terms of logistics, venues, guest lists, costs. "We're going to set a date," she said, "soon." "That's good," I replied. She watched me for a moment, then said, "I want you there, Dad. I want you to be part of it." The words should have warmed me. Instead, I felt a faint sense of being maneuvered, like a chess piece being placed. "That's kind," I said. "It's not kind," she corrected, smiling. "It's normal. You're my father." I nodded. Then, smoothly, as if it were a natural next step, she said, "Which is why we should make sure everything is organized, just in case." There it was. The will again, wrapped in the language of inclusion. "I'm still here," I said. "I know," she replied, her tone soothing. "I'm not saying you're not. I'm saying we should be sensible." Sensible was her favorite word. It made opposition sound childish. After she left, I found myself going through my filing cabinet slowly, carefully, like a man searching for something he hopes he won't find. I checked my documents. I checked what was missing. I checked whether the will was still there. It was. But the folder had been shifted, and the papers were not in the exact order I kept them. A minor thing, perhaps. The kind of thing that could happen when someone rummages through your paperwork with good intentions. Still, I noticed. From then on, I began to keep notes. Not dramatic notes, not accusations. Just a small notebook I kept in the drawer beside my bed. Dates, conversations. What was said. What was suggested. What I agreed to. What I did not. It was a habit from an older part of my life, when I worked and had to keep records. A small discipline that made me feel anchored. If I couldn't stand steadily, if I couldn't drive, if I couldn't even make tea without supervision, then at least I could write. At least I could document my own mind. And as I wrote, I began to see the pattern more clearly. The help was real. The worry might have been real too. But the direction of it was always the same. Toward her hands, toward her decisions, toward her control. And I, still bruised and healing and grateful enough to stay quiet, was letting it happen. She did not mention the will again for a few days after that. Instead, she leaned harder into care. She arrived with groceries chosen for me, not with me. Low salt, lean protein, things she said my body needed now. She rearranged my pantry so the things I shouldn't have were on the top shelf, out of reach unless I stretched. She did not comment on that. She didn't have to. She scheduled my days. The nurse came on Mondays and Thursdays. Physiotherapy on Tuesdays and Fridays. On Wednesdays, she stopped by herself, just to check in. Sundays were for rest, which meant she called instead of coming. Each visit followed a rhythm. She would ask how I felt, listen briefly, then move on to what needed to be done. "Did you take your morning pills? Did you do the exercises? Did you weigh yourself?" If I answered incorrectly, she would correct it. If I hesitated, she would interpret it as confusion. "You're tired," she would say. "It's understandable." Tired became her explanation for everything that did not align with her plans. I began to feel as though my thoughts had to pass through a filter before they were allowed to exist. Anything decisive was suspect. Anything uncertain was proof. One afternoon, while she was at my kitchen table with her laptop open again, she said, "I spoke to your bank." I looked up. "You did what?" "I spoke to your bank," she repeated calmly. "Just to ask about options, fraud protection, power of attorney, that sort of thing." "I didn't ask you to do that," I said. "I know," she replied, not defensively. "But it's important." I felt a slow heat rise in my chest. Not anger exactly, something closer to alarm. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That you're recovering from surgery and that I'm helping you manage things temporarily," she said. They were very understanding. Temporary. Another word that implied an end point without ever defining it. "I don't want anyone speaking for me," I said. She closed her laptop part-way, a gesture that suggested attention. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly about this." "I am thinking clearly," I said. "I don't want power of attorney." Her mouth tightened, just slightly. "I'm not saying we do it immediately. I'm saying we should prepare." "I don't need preparation," I said. "I need rest." She nodded slowly, as if indulging a child. "That's exactly my point." That night, after she left, I wrote in my notebook longer than usual. I wrote down her words. I wrote down my responses. I wrote down the way she had looked at me when I disagreed. It was the look of someone recalculating. The next time she brought up the will, it was framed as a kindness to me. "I found a solicitor who specializes in elder estates," she said. "They do home visits." "I'm not interested," I replied. "Dad," she said gently, "you shouldn't have to go anywhere. They come to you. They make it easy." "I don't want it," I said again. She leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "You're being stubborn." "I'm being myself," I said. She sighed. "You're being scared." That word landed heavily between us. "I'm not scared," I said. "You nearly died," she replied. "Anyone would be scared." "I'm cautious," I said. "There's a difference." She shook her head slightly. "You're refusing to plan because you don't want to think about what could happen. That's fear." It was clever. She had reframed my resistance as a weakness, not a choice. "I don't want to talk about this anymore," I said. She held my gaze for a moment, then softened again. "Okay, we'll leave it for now. For now." After that, she began involving others, subtly. She spoke to my GP again, then repeated his words to me. "He thinks it would be sensible for you to reduce stress. Letting someone else handle your affairs would help." She spoke to a social worker, who called me and asked general questions about my support network. I answered carefully. I did not complain. Complaints sound unstable when you are old. She spoke to extended family members, people I hadn't seen in years. They called with concern in their voices. "Your daughter tells us you're not well," one cousin said. "We're glad she's taking care of things." Taking care of things. A phrase that covered a great deal. I noticed that my daughter was always present during these calls, hovering nearby, listening. If I hesitated, she would fill the silence. "He's tired today," she would say. "It's been a big week." My world began to feel smaller, not because I could not move, but because every path led back to her. One afternoon, when she was late arriving, I attempted something small and defiant. I drove. It was only to the end of the street and back. I moved slowly, carefully, my hands steady on the wheel. The car felt unfamiliar after weeks of disuse, but the act of being alone in it felt like oxygen. When I returned, she was pulling into the driveway. Her face changed the moment she saw the car. "Did you drive?" she asked sharply. "Yes," I said. Her voice dropped. You are not cleared to drive. I drove 10 meters, I said. I was careful. That's not the point, she said. If something happened, nothing happened, I interrupted. She stared at me, her jaw tight. You could have killed someone. The exaggeration was deliberate. It widened the stakes until my actions seemed reckless instead of human. I'm not a child, I said quietly. Her expression shifted again, quickly. She reached out and touched my arm. I know, she said. I'm just trying to keep you safe. Safe again. That evening, she told me she had booked an appointment with the solicitor. He's coming next Thursday, she said. Just to talk. No, I said. She looked surprised, as if the idea of refusal had not occurred to her. Dad, no, I repeated. I'm not meeting him. She pressed her lips together. You don't have to decide anything. It's just a conversation. I don't want the conversation, I said. She watched me closely, then said, You're not well enough to make these decisions alone. There it was, the quiet escalation. I am well enough, I said, and I am making them. She exhaled slowly, as if calming herself. Okay, I hear you. But she did not cancel the appointment. On Thursday morning, the solicitor arrived. I was sitting in my armchair when the doorbell rang. I had not been told a time. I had not agreed to this. My daughter opened the door and ushered him in as if he were an expected guest. He was a neat man in a dark suit, polite, professional. He shook my hand and smiled reassuringly. I won't take much of your time, he said. Your daughter asked me to stop by and explain some options. I didn't ask you to, I said. He glanced at her, then back at me. Of course. This is entirely voluntary. My daughter stood behind him, her presence filling the room. We can just talk, she said. There's no obligation. I felt trapped. Refusing now would make me look unreasonable. Agreeing would move things forward. Fine, I said. Talk. The solicitor spoke about clarity, about reducing burden, about avoiding disputes. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if addressing someone fragile. My daughter nodded along, occasionally adding details about my health, my limitations, my confusion. I corrected her when she overstated things. She smiled and waved it away. Dad forgets sometimes, she said lightly. It's normal after surgery. The solicitor looked at me with concern. I saw it then, clearly. This was not about preparation. It was about establishing a narrative, that I was diminished, unreliable, in need of guidance. When the solicitor left, my daughter turned to me. You see, she said, that wasn't so bad. I don't want him back, I said. She paused. Why are you making this so difficult? Because you're deciding things for me, I said. Because you're talking about me as if I'm not here. Her eyes flashed, just briefly. Because you won't accept reality. What reality? I asked. That you can't live like you used to, she said. That you're vulnerable. That things need to change. Things can change without you taking over, I said. She looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, You don't trust me. The statement was loaded. It placed the burden on me. I trust you to be my daughter, I said, not my manager. She stood up. I've given up weeks of my life for you. I didn't ask you to, I said. Silence filled the room. After that day, her visits became colder. She still came. She still brought food. She still organized appointments. But the warmth had gone. The gentle tone was replaced by efficiency. She began sending me emails summarizing conversations we had just had. Per our discussion, we'll proceed with, as agreed, I'll handle. For clarity, you confirmed. I had confirmed nothing. I replied carefully, correcting her where necessary. She replied back, reframing. I began to see the emails not as communication, but as records. Evidence. One evening, she mentioned her wedding again. "We've set a date," she said. "It's soon." "That's good," I said. "I want you there," she repeated. "I'll be there," I said. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Then we need to make sure you're stable." Stable. Another assessment word. "We'll see how I'm going," I said. She nodded. "And we need to sort things out before then, just in case." The will again, hovering behind every sentence. I did not argue. I did not agree. I simply continued to write in my notebook. Dates, words, patterns, and slowly, as the weeks passed and my strength returned in small increments, I understood something clearly. My daughter was not waiting for me to die. She was waiting for me to stop resisting. The wedding invitation arrived by email. That alone felt strange. I had imagined something printed, something formal I could hold in my hands. But the message appeared on my tablet one morning while I was eating breakfast, the screen lighting up with her name. It was warm in tone, careful, almost affectionate. She wrote about wanting me there, about how much it would mean to her, about family coming together. She acknowledged my health in a general way, saying she understood travel might be difficult but that she hoped I would try. The date was 6 weeks away. I read it twice, then a third time. There was nothing overtly wrong with it. No obvious cruelty. Just enough distance to feel deliberate. When she came by later that day, I mentioned it. "I got your invitation," I said. She smiled quickly. "Good. I was hoping you'd see it before we talked." "It's soon," I said. "Yes," she replied. "We didn't want to wait. Life's unpredictable." The words lingered between us. They echoed too closely the language she had used about my health, about urgency, about planning before something happened. "I'll come," I said. She looked relieved, but there was something else there too. Calculation, perhaps. "We'll make arrangements," she said. "I'll help you plan the trip." "I can plan it," I said. She hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. Just let me know what you decide." Over the following weeks, my recovery improved in visible ways. I walked more confidently. I reduced my reliance on the walker inside the house. The physiotherapist was pleased. The nurse reduced her visits. Each improvement seemed to irritate my daughter slightly, as if progress complicated her assumptions. "You're still fragile," she reminded me whenever I demonstrated independence. Fragile had become her preferred description of me. It followed me like a shadow. As the wedding approached, she began asking detailed questions about my travel plans. "When are you leaving? How long will you stay? Are you sure you can manage the journey?" I told her I was taking the train rather than driving. It felt safer, and I liked the idea of being carried rather than steering. She approved of that. "I'll book assistance," she said. "They can help you on and off." "I can manage," I said. "It's better to be cautious," she replied. "Always cautious, always safer." I booked my ticket myself. I chose a seat near the aisle. I planned to arrive the day before the wedding and stay 2 nights. I did not share all of this with her. I had learned that information was something she used, not simply received. The week before I was due to leave, she came over with another folder. "I just want to make sure everything is clear before you go," she said. I knew what was coming before she opened it. "This is the will," she said. "I've made some suggested changes." "I'm not changing it," I said. She sighed. "Dad, I'm going to the wedding," I continued. "I'm alive. I'm thinking clearly. This can wait." Her eyes hardened. "You're being irresponsible." "No," I said. "I'm being deliberate." She leaned forward. "If something happens while you're traveling, stop," I said quietly. She froze, surprised by my tone. I rarely raised my voice. I hadn't now, not really, but there was firmness in it she wasn't used to. I'm not signing anything, I said. Not before your wedding, not after. If I choose to change my will, it will be because I decide to, not because I'm pressured. Her face shifted through several expressions before settling on something neutral. Fine, she said. We'll talk about it later. Later. Again. The night before I left, I packed slowly. I laid clothes out on the bed and folded them with care. The act felt ceremonial, as if I were preparing for something larger than a weekend away. I packed my medications carefully, double-checking doses. I packed my notebook. I slept poorly. The train journey was long and tiring, but manageable. The station staff helped as arranged. I thanked them, embarrassed by the attention, but grateful all the same. As the countryside passed by the window, I felt something close to peace. Movement, even passive movement, reminded me that the world still extended beyond my living room and my daughter's plans. I arrived in the city in the early evening. I took a taxi to the hotel I had booked. It was modest but clean. I checked in and went straight to my room, exhausted. I lay on the bed, fully clothed for a while, listening to unfamiliar sounds through the window. Traffic, voices, life continuing. I texted my daughter to say I had arrived safely. She replied quickly. Glad you made it. Rest up. Big day tomorrow. The next morning, I woke early. My body ached from the journey, but it was a satisfying ache, the kind that comes from effort rather than decline. I dressed slowly, carefully. I had chosen a suit I hadn't worn in years. It felt heavy, formal. I struggled with the buttons but managed. I checked the address again. The wedding was scheduled for midday. There was time. I ordered room service for breakfast, something I rarely did. It felt like an indulgence. At 10:30, my phone rang. It was my daughter. Dad, she said, her voice brisk. Where are you? At the hotel, I replied, getting ready. There was a pause. You're at the hotel? Yes, I said. Where else would I be? Another pause, longer this time. Dad, she said carefully. The ceremony was yesterday. The words did not make sense at first. They slid off my mind without finding purchase. What do you mean? I asked. She exhaled. There must have been a misunderstanding. We had a small ceremony yesterday afternoon. Today is just a family lunch. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. You invited me for today, I said. Yes, she replied, for the celebration. The legal part was already done. You said the wedding was today, I said. She hesitated. We might have talked about different things. My heart was beating faster now, not from exertion, but from something colder. So I missed it, I said. Well, she said, choosing her words. You were never going to manage yesterday. It was too much. You didn't tell me, I said. We didn't want to pressure you, she replied. We thought this was best. Best. Always best, as she defined it. I looked around the hotel room, the suit hanging half-buttoned, the notebook on the desk, my packed bag still by the door. So why am I here? I asked. She sounded faintly irritated now. For the lunch, for photos, to be included. Included. The word felt hollow. When did you decide this? I asked. It wasn't a decision, she said quickly. It was just how things worked out. There was a silence between us, thick and irreversible. I'll come to the lunch, I said eventually. Good, she replied, relief creeping back into her voice. I'll send you the address. The lunch was held in a private room at a restaurant. When I arrived, people were already there, laughing, drinking, celebrating something I had not witnessed. My daughter greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and an apology that wasn't really an apology. I'm sorry if there was confusion, she said. You know how hectic these things are. She introduced me to people I had already met, framing me as frail but brave. He insisted on coming, she told them, even though he's still recovering. They smiled at me with sympathy and admiration. I sat at the table and watched as stories of the ceremony were told. How beautiful it was. How intimate. How meaningful. I nodded. I smiled when required. At one point, my daughter's husband thanked me for making the trip. "It means a lot to her," he said. I looked at him and wondered what he had been told. When the lunch ended, my daughter hugged me again. "I'm glad you're here," she said. I nodded. I am too. But I wasn't. That night, back in my hotel room, I took out my notebook and wrote for a long time. Not about the wedding itself, about the pattern, about the way information had been controlled, about how my presence had been managed to suit appearances, about how exclusion had been disguised as protection. I returned home the next day. My daughter did not come to see me for a while after that. When she did, she brought the folder again. "We need to talk," she said. I closed my notebook. "Yes," I replied. "We do." She did not sit down when she came in. She stood near the doorway, the folder tucked under her arm like a shield. Her posture was formal, restrained, the way it gets when a person has decided this is a conversation they intend to control. "I think it's time we were honest with each other," she said. I remained in my chair. My leg ached in the familiar, manageable way. The house was quiet. I had learned to appreciate quiet. "I've been honest," I said. She exhaled slowly. "Dad, you're avoiding reality." "Which reality is that?" I asked. "That you can't live independently anymore," she replied. "That things nearly went very wrong. That you're not as capable as you think." I watched her carefully as she spoke. There was no anger in her voice, no malice, just conviction. "I fell," I said. "I didn't disappear." She shook her head. "You don't see how close it was." "I see it clearly," I said. "That's why I'm being careful, not because I'm incapable, but because I'm still alive." She opened the folder and placed it on the table between us. "I've made arrangements," she said, "for the future, for your care, for your assets. It's all very reasonable." "I didn't ask you to," I said. "I know," she replied, "but you needed someone to step in." "No," I said. "You wanted to." The words landed with more weight than I intended. She stiffened slightly. "That's unfair," she said. "It may be," I replied, "but it's true." She looked down at the folder, then back at me. "If you don't cooperate, things will get difficult." There it was. Not a threat, exactly. A statement of consequence. "In what way?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "People will start asking questions. Doctors, banks, social services. They'll wonder why you're refusing help." "I'm not refusing help," I said. "I'm refusing control." She laughed softly, without humor. "You can't separate the two." "I can," I said, "and I am." She closed the folder slowly. "I don't want to fight with you," she said. "I just want what's best." "You want what's efficient," I said. "What's neat? What fits your timeline?" She looked at me sharply. "What timeline?" I did not answer. I did not need to. There was a long silence, the kind that doesn't invite resolution. Finally, she said, "If you won't make changes willingly, others may have to get involved." I nodded. "They can." She stared at me, perhaps expecting fear. There was none. Not now. The worst thing had already happened. Not the fall, not the surgery. The moment I arrived at that hotel believing I was wanted, only to learn I was late by design. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Possibly," I replied, "but it's mine." She left shortly after that. The days that followed were quiet. No more daily visits. No more emails summarizing conversations. No more folders. I received a letter from my bank requesting confirmation of recent inquiries. I responded in writing, clearly, firmly. I met with my own solicitor, one I chose. I brought my notebook. I explained everything calmly. He listened without interruption. "You're lucid," he said afterward. "You're capable. There's no obligation to change anything." "I know," I replied. We reviewed my will. I made only minor updates. Nothing that shifted control. Nothing rushed. Nothing reactive. I also wrote a separate letter, sealed and dated, outlining my wishes regarding decision-making should I become unable to speak for myself. It named no one in particular. It stated principles, not permissions. When my daughter learned of this, weeks later, she was furious. But fury looks different when it has nowhere to go. She accused me of mistrust, of ingratitude, of choosing stubbornness over family. I listened. When she finished, I said, "I went to your wedding believing I mattered." She had no answer for that. Time passed. Our contact became infrequent, then formal. Occasional messages on birthdays, brief calls, nothing deep. She did not apologize. I did not ask her to. I continued my routines. Physiotherapy ended. The nurse stopped visiting. I walked without assistance. Slowly but steadily. The house became mine again. The chairs returned to where I preferred them. The lists came down from the fridge. The pill organizer remained, but I filled it myself. I still wrote in my notebook, though less often now. Habit, more than necessity. I thought about the wedding sometimes. Not with bitterness, with clarity. It had not been an accident. It had not been confusion. It had been a decision made for convenience, disguised as care. I understood that my daughter loved me in her own way. But love that requires obedience is not the kind that sustains you. As the months went on, my health stabilized. I did not regain everything I had lost. I did not expect to. Age takes its due. But I remained present in my own life. One afternoon, sitting by the window with the sun warming my hands, I felt a quiet sense of closure settle over me. Not forgiveness. Acceptance. I had seen the shape of things clearly enough to stop trying to reshape them. I was no longer waiting for inclusion. I was simply living on my own terms for as long as I was able. And that I found was enough.